And welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. Again, discussing what to do when you're mid. I don't like having a lot of teams like these, but I definitely have two or so I've been struggling with what to do on them. I think the first thing when we talked about doing this episode, David, we wanted to talk about the different types of mid. And David, do you mind briefly explaining why you think it's so important to determine kind of the range of mid you're in or the type of mid template?
Understanding when you are mid is really important because if you think you're competing but you're mid, you're going to be wasting a season. If you're trying to rebuild but you're mid, then you're wasting some potential draft capital. So for me, it's all about knowing your goal and making actions towards that goal. That's something that I've been trying to make a bigger part of my process in general. And I think this is a great example of that. So like if you're stuck in the middle, but you've been collecting assets, you're now starting to spend them. You've got some really high quality rookies you believe. Maybe you just made a trade for a stud or you're thinking about making a trade for a stud. You can be mid, but heading towards competing, and that's okay. We're going to kind of dive into how we handle that situation. Kind of on the opposite side of the coin, you got to pass through mid to get into your rebuild eventually, right? Theoretically, you had a good team. Maybe it became mid unintentionally, maybe it was intentionally, but either way, you're going to have to dive down to the bottom to rebuild. And then the worst part, the dreaded mid and not knowing which direction you're heading, that is when it's not fun. It's hard to get out. It's hard to pick a direction. You can't compete, you can't rebuild. Like, what do you do in that specific situation? You really need to pick a goal and just start acting towards that goal. That's the biggest thing, is you don't want to be stuck in the middle.
Do not want to be stuck in the middle because you'll be stuck there with me. But in general, these mid teams, the most important thing is picking which one of those you are. So we're going to break down, starting with the fun one, which is mid trending towards competing. How do we identify that team? And there's some simple things. That mid trending towards competing team, you probably are pretty close to filling out a full roster that you feel confident in. Maybe even you have a full roster. Probably you're lacking the depth to feel like you're a championship contender. So a lot of the time you'll see one or two kind of cornerstone elite players that you feel like are championship level players, like Neighbors, Jefferson, could be a Jaden Daniels. You probably have like one guy that's young, sexy like that. Then you have a handful of younger upside players, right? This is the type of team that you feel like you have a good cornerstone type of build to the team that can compete or make the playoffs possibly as like the 5-6 team, but you probably need to do something to compete for a bye. Is that kind of how you view it as well there, David? Something along those lines?
Yeah, pretty much. I think for me specifically in this situation, like, it is a process to get from rebuild to competing. So you need to accept that. And for me personally, I want to build my core, like you were talking about, at least one or two really high quality assets and some good upside around that I feel confident in. Look, sometimes the upside misses and you got to take out your rebuild an extra year, which is why we don't want to be overconfident and go all in too fast. I think that's something we'll talk about here in a minute a little bit more. For me, I like to think about, so you're down here for a rebuild and you're going to come up through mid to get to competitive, right? So I don't know, if you have to sit there for a year, that's okay. But typically what I want to be doing is building my core, and I want to have enough late first, seconds, thirds, whatever it is, to go buy, your Tony Pollards, your DeAndre Swifts, James Connors, the ugly guys. Maybe you can afford a Devontae Adams or something. Some of those ugly veterans that you can compete with without mortgaging too much of your future. For me, that's when I really know that I'm close to competing. But it's okay to also just be building. You don't have to buy those veterans till you know that those veterans are actually going to give you a chance to compete.
And one thing I'm looking for to know that I'm mid leaning towards rebuilding as opposed to just mid is that I have extra pick, right? Or I have picks that I don't need to spend. Basically, it's possible the only thing I have is, a first, second, third, and fourth. Maybe they're mine, maybe they're someone else's, but I just have those 4 picks or even just 3 of those picks, right? I have a first, a second, and a fourth, maybe, or something like that. That can be enough to be mid tending towards competing, as long as I feel like I have a full lineup filled up and maybe one bench player. I'm an injury or two away from a bad season potentially, but also I have this first and second to fill those in season if I need to, right? But ideally, I think one of the things you need to feel confident in is having those pick for flexibility, because I think if you don't have any picks, you're in a really tough bind when your team, if you look at it and you're just like, I can't threaten for a bye problem. I'm probably not scaring anybody in the playoffs and I don't have any ammo to improve my team. That's not this build specifically. This build, I need to feel like I have that ammo to improve, and I probably am close to being scary, right? I could squint and say, on a good day, my team could beat any other team in this league, and I have a first to buy a veteran down the stretch if I look like a playoff lock. I think that's kind of what I'm looking
And I think kind of to piggyback off of that, like the season that you think you can compete as when you're turning your rebuild around, it's okay to wait a few weeks or a month into the season. Because like we were just talking about, if most of your team is high upside players, a month of actual in-season data is so much better than anything any of us talking on microphones can tell you right now. So if you see that the guys you were counting on to step up, that you needed to step up in order to compete, are stepping up, maybe you want to invest that first. Maybe you want to buy someone to invest in your lineup and just go for it. But on the other side of that, if they're starting to suck, maybe you say, okay, maybe I do need to take another year on this rebuild. Maybe I need to take a step back. Maybe I need to sell some of these guys on spike weeks, save up my picks. So I think patience is really important, because it's sometimes it's hard to thread that needle of when you want to switch from rebuild to contender. And I've had some teams where you do it all in one off season. I've had some teams where I thought I did it in an off season, and like I just said, it didn't quite work out, and I needed to pivot. So I think the worst thing you can do, and maybe you disagree here, Justin, I don't know, but I think the worst thing you can do is push your chips in too quickly, because you start 2-2. Oh no, I'm not going to get a bye. It's okay. It's 2-2. You're going to lose a few games even with a great team, most likely. So I think just be patient and like get as much data as you can before you have to commit. I think that's how I like to handle it.
And since we're on the habit of piggybacking off of things, I'm going to piggyback off of that a little bit too here, David. In general, especially if you're pushing in your first, I need to be confident that if my first is the 103 or 104, I'm not kicking myself over this trade. You can feel pretty good about that, but sometimes it'll surprise you. Like last offseason, I moved my first for Chris Olave, thinking I should be competing. I ended up being the 104. In a vacuum, if I told you I moved next year's 104 for Chris Olave going into last offseason before the concussion issues and everything, it's like I think that's around fair market value for him. So like I was okay with that. I had a lot of other things go wrong too. You can see those types of moves even when you are pushing in at, like, if this is a mid to early, I'm still happy with the deal and still backfire on you. So just, yes, we do want to take with a grain of salt the fact that we feel like we're ready to push in and just say, am I really ready to push in? If you can wait till the regular season, I love to advise people to wait 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then buy somebody if you are 3-1 or 2-2, and it looks like there's somebody who's willing to sell now. Being young and mid is the best place to be, because you can be young and mid. If 80% of your assets on your roster are people that you think have a good chance to accrue value, to accumulate value because they're young wide receivers, young quarterbacks, or young running backs and tight ends can as well, right? Like maybe you've got like a Colston Loveland at tight end, you have Travis Hunter, you have some young players that probably aren't going to, we don't expect them to necessarily score a lot the first half of the season, but can come on strong down the way. Those are the types of teams where I'm really looking to push off. So we just wanted to make sure we really talk at the beginning about it's okay to not push in. Don't push in too early. If you're not sure, we wouldn't push in right now, probably, if you're not really so sure, unless it's a really good value, right? If you're like, this is a screaming value for player X, player Y, like I would take this on a total rebuild just because I feel like this player will be worth more later. I don't have any doubts about this, that I could sell them for more than I'm acquiring them once they're scoring points in season. Like, go for it. But just in general, trepidation. So now that we've given this 10-minute long caveat about not pushing in too early, which is honestly critical. And we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, that everyone has their own risk appetite for, are you willing to push in for 2 years at this point and then have to rebuild again? Maybe that's how you want to play fantasy football. 2 years off, 2 years on, 1 year off. If that's how you're building, but that's typically not how David or I are trying to build. We're trying to build something that can compete for a 6-year window in a perfect world, right? Maybe it ends up being 4 or 5, but we don't want to just push too much in. So all that being said, when we've identified, hey, I have 3 firsts and I need to fill 1 hole or 2 holes. I have 3 firsts in a couple seconds. I need to fill a couple of holes on my roster, right? But I'm going to have extra ammo after I fill these holes, and I can do it. And I have a good core. What are the types of moves you're looking to make then, David?
I mean, obviously context is important in all of these situations. You always need to take your team into its context, but I think there's kind of 2 ways we can handle this here. For me, I think when I'm rebuilding, oftentimes it's coming off a productive struggle or taking over an orphan. Taking over an orphan's a little harder to pull this off. But if I'm coming off a productive struggle, chances are I've got several firsts and I'm missing a core player or 2 that I really want. So I'm okay taking a swing, a big swing. I mean, go get yourself Malik Neighbors, go get CeeDee Lamb, go get Brian Thomas Jr., whatever your piece, Bijan if you need a running back, whatever your piece is missing. But you have to have the right amount of assets and the right build to be able to make that move. Typically, I've found on about a year and a half, you get to make a move like that. Even when you have a healthy roster, sometimes it's a little bit longer, sometimes it's a little shorter. But I think, one every year and a half or so 2 every 3 years, basically, you get to make a move like this. So if you've got that kind of assets and you're missing that kind of player, well, take the swing. It's okay. You get Jamar Chase and you rebuild for an extra year. He's still going to be excellent next year. Maybe Malik Neighbors is more preferred if you're in that situation, but you get the point. The other side of it, if you've already got those core players, maybe you've got 3 extra firsts instead of 5. In that case, I feel good about my core. I'm always open to adding to my core for the right price. So yeah, I'll probably poke around at some of these elite assets. But honestly, if I'm just trying to fill up my roster, I'm going to pocket as many of those firsts as I can and save them in season or even till after the season. I'm going to go bargain diving. I'm going to use my seconds, my thirds, whatever I can to just buy cheap points. If I've got a young core intact, I spend money on cheap points. I feel like I can replace them every year if I need to. They're always there. The names change, but the points don't. So I think those are the two ways that you can handle having those assets needing to spend them here. You agree with that, Justin? You got anything else?
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking for Jawan Jennings, Darnell Mooney, Jerry Judy. If I need a wide receiver, if I need just like fill out one wide receiver spot, can I get any of those guys for 2/3? Judy, I'm happy paying a second and a third for if it's a later second because I think he's decent value. Can I get Mooney for 2/3? Can I get Khalil Shakir for a couple thirds if whoever has him is low on him? Flex plays, right? Portland Sutton for a mid third or mid second next year, right? That type of stuff. Chris Godwin for a second, maybe a second and a third, stuff like that. Keep those first is, I think, the ideal way to go. Another thing I don't mind personally doing is seeing how much more than a first do I need to pay for Devonta Smith, T. Higgins. I personally like Zay Flowers for what I project to be a late first. Well enough. I think he's going to be a flex play wide receiver 2-3 turn guy for years to come. Those are the types of players I like to plug into these teams if he's going to be plugging in as my wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5 ideally, right? If I have some hammer-ish wide receivers, if he can be my wide receiver 4, I don't hate making those types of moves because I think it matches up with this team's build of being mid and young. Well, I added a little bit more mid and young, but hopefully it's higher average mid and young and it's filling in a starter. In a start 9, I'm not as interested in a Devonta Smith or Zay Flowers. In a start 11, I'm very interested in those guys, just to kind of caveat a little bit as well. But I think in general, I would prefer to keep the first and try to move other picks for a later player. RBs, you guys know the names. Chuba, if you can get him cheap. Mara, Mixon. Honestly, I love Rashad White as an RB buy if you can get him for a couple of thirds. He was still a RB 1 or 2 a lot down the stretch, even with Bucky taking over a lot. He's just a PPR guy who's going to get some work. I know they had wide receiver injuries, but if you're not paying a second for him, and he has a lot of handcuff upside. So there's just James Conner. You guys know the names, right? You guys have been playing Dynasty hopefully for a while. If not, just look up old crusty vets. Well, maybe don't Google that. But the idea should be pretty self-evident, right? Those are the types of guys that we prefer to add. We keep the flexibility. You're down some seconds and thirds, but if you're still mid, right, you have these firsts to do one of two things. Decide, oh, well, I lost a couple seconds, but I can sell these players close enough to what I bought them for in season and decide to tank halfway through the season a little bit. I haven't moved my firsts or my first specifically, most importantly, hopefully. Or you have those firsts to push in, right? So gives you a lot of flexibility and delaying decision making. I preached that a lot last offseason. Haven't been as good at it this offseason myself. I think I've been impatient. I need to get into more startups so I don't trade as many picks away and stuff. But I do try to keep my first unless I know I'm a lock, essentially, to hopefully get a buy. That's when I want to move my first, is when shit would have to hit a fan to such an incredible extent for me to not get a buy, let alone miss the playoffs. That's when I want to move. And I think that's probably about all I have to say about this specific type of mid. David, any other things you really think we need to talk in a circle about?
Just a couple real quick things I'll add to your points here. The only other time I'll consider selling my first is like it's fantasy. We got to take some risks. We got to make some bets. If you really do feel good about your team going in, you think this is your year, but like you were the 103 last year, try and sell your first while someone still views it as potentially early mid. Maybe they are smart enough to see it's not going to be the 101. Maybe they're smart enough to see you're going to be competing for the playoffs. But if you go buy that guy and you become a real championship favorite, it's only going to lose value as you keep winning games. So if you're confident in your team, it's okay to make the bet. Just know it's risky because it could backfire.
On that note, if you have multiple firsts and you feel like, especially in that situation where I had one where I was the 101 last year, Orphan, I took over, I gutted it. I bought Rasheed Rice and other players that are now coming back off of injuries. I'm going to be good to go week 1 next year. Full lineup looks good. But somebody, in the rookie draft, I was able to move my first, like you're saying, and get Quinshon Judkins, and I kept another first. So I do like to, if I sell my first instead of another first that I have, if I know that I'm transitioning out of this, just make sure that you are sure you're transitioning out of this, like David said. Because I got better value for my first because I was just the 101, but I knew I wouldn't be anymore because I made 100 trades this offseason. So brilliant point, David.
And then just the last thing, this is just real quick. We've kind of alluded to it, but of the 3, different situations we're going to talk about here, this is the only one I'm okay having a full season in this situation. The other 2, I am aggressively trying to adjust. So I just wanted to close that by saying that if you end up being mid for a season and you're mid, but you've got young talent and it's building and it's growing to something, that's okay.
100% okay. Now moving on to something that I'm not okay with, and I have at least one team that fits in mid, and you're just mid, and you're going to be mid, and you're just in the middle, and there's no plan, and you haven't been able to push in, you haven't been able to sell out. What do you do, David? What do I do in this one team I have like this?
Boy, it sucks. I've at least one team in this situation. You've got to assess the league, you've got to assess your team, and you've got to pick a direction. And by assess the league, I don't just mean are there super teams, are there really good teams that you have no chance of competing with, but how active is it? How likely are you to be able to buy old crusty veterans for cheap points if you want that? How likely are you going to be able to sell your studs if you need to retool completely? I have one orphan I just took over. The league, it's not full at this point, so that's I'm trying to be fair to it, but it's had like 2 moves made in the last month or so since I joined, 2 months since I joined. And like I said, it's not full. So I'm not making moves till it's full because I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to pick a direction until I know for sure the league's going to continue. So I'm hoping that's kind of the case. But I'd really like to sell players in that league, and I'm just not sure if the market will allow me to. That's tough because then I've got to decide, what I think is best is to rebuild and try and sell some assets. But what might be the most likely, like possible, is that I go spend some of my picks and just try to plug in a few holes and hope to compete. So it really is league dependent and team dependent. You've got to be very honest with yourself about both your team and your league. If you think you should rebuild and it's active enough, then rebuild. I think that's the most clear I can put this.
Yeah. There are some kind of caveats to that. Most important thing to assess in this type of thing. Do you own your first? If you don't own your first, probably don't want to start rebuilding. Sometimes you might honestly have to. You first thing first is you're mid. Hey, take a screenshot of Dynasty Daddy's playoff calculators and say, I'm either going to be the 107 or the 106, right? I'm buying a mid first. Tell them that. If you can look up on Dynasty Daddy, you go to the playoff calculator, or you go to some other website that does the same thing that tells you you're right on the cusp of the playoffs. Just say hey, I'm on the cusp of the playoffs. You're gonna get a mid first. I'll buy it at a mid first price, and give you an extra third because I want to be able to try to sell it that way. You need to have your first to move that direction. And that's going to be also true. We'll reiterate it for the next one. Also true for mid intending to rebuild. Now, if you have your first and you're in this situation, one other thing you really don't want to do is tear down too much or sell cornerstone pieces. Like my team that's mid like this, I have Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb on, but tight end premium, my tight ends suck. My RBs are all super mid. They're all tier 7 from our RB tier video that we just released. I don't have anybody who's worth more than a mid to late second at RB, and I don't have any bench depth. I own my first, second, third, and fourth the next year. So what do I do in this situation? What I don't want to do is I don't want to try to sell these RBs in the offseason unless I think they're going to lose their job. So DeAndre Swift, there's no reason for us to think he's going to lose his job. I don't want to sell him. If I had somebody who was more in the lines of let's just throw in Tony Pollard, right? Could he lose his job? Is it possible Tyjae Spears starts in front instead of him? I'm more likely to try to sell that guy, right? So just thinking about those types of things. And then if I don't have any bench depth and I sell my first for a player and now I'm just pushing DeAndre Swift to my bench, I have one more spot of flexibility, right? I now have a bench player that I can start during bye weeks, etc. But I'm not really in a better situation. So I'm very wary about pushing in on this. I almost always want to lean to rebuild for 1 year in this. So I think my ideal situation in that team is keep those cornerstone assets in CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, try to sell the RBs, because if I can void all my RB spots and maybe move I have Xavier Worthy. If I can move him for a future first, I'd love to do that in that league, right? Because Honestly, I expect him to best case scenario be worth about a mid to mid first next year too, right? If I can get a random first for him. So like keep the cornerstone assets, the fringe assets. So Xavier Worthy, DJ Moore, I have on that team as well. If I can sell those pieces for firsts or close to a first, now I can retool the next year, right? So I think a 1 year retool is something I'm probably most interested in do. Is that kind of usually your best case scenario? Is a 1 year retool, keep the core assets, David?
I think so. I think the most common way to get into this position, if you are consuming content, you're probably a pretty sharp guy. You care about your teams. You put in the effort. So in my opinion, the most common way to get in this situation is taking over an orphan that has no direction. Sometimes in that case, you don't have a choice because you don't have that many assets. So you might have to take CD Lamb and turn him into Drake London in a first. And, maybe you have to add in something on your side. I don't know. But I think that's about the move you'd be looking to make. Maybe it's Marv, maybe it's Jason, whoever it is. But you don't, kind of back to the first point you made when you took over last, you don't want to go down to Zay Flowers and 2 firsts or something. That really, you are breaking up your core. And you're really counting on those firsts to come in and hit for you. So I think in some cases you're going to have to do a move where you move off a core piece, but you just want to make sure you don't go too far down, like you were saying.
And don't sell for pennies on the dollar either.
Definitely don't.
Lamb, JJ, these guys are worth 3.5 to 4 firsts. You're getting at least 3.5 firsts, or you're really not trying to move off of those guys. So do not sell studs cheap.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody on my team is ever off limits, even if I'm competing. But in this situation specifically, nobody's off limits. But you need to know who your core players are because they can't be cheap. They can't be sold at a discount. They have to help you accomplish your goals. So if you're selling a tier 1 wide receiver and you think you're going to compete next year, like I said, don't drop all the way down to a guy that is just a guy, a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 kind of guy. Keep a guy that's young that you think can replace him in your core and still pick up that extra asset. But yeah, I think in most cases, if you're mid with no direction, you're actually just secretly mid heading towards a rebuild. You just are slowing the process a little too much.
I think that's generally, honestly, probably the truth. One thing I will say, though, that is something we've advised last offseason in some similar episode types that we did give an advice, talking about that Dynasty Daddy, league projection ranking. Maybe I'm 6th, 7th in the league projection. Maybe I'm projected 8th, but I have I'm in there. I look at the other 4 teams in there. I ask these guys, hey, I'm stuck in the middle. I want to go one way or the other. Are you lending towards competing or rebuilding? Maybe all 3 other teams stuck in the middle tell you they want to rebuild. Maybe now you can get some value to push the other way, or maybe vice versa. They're all thinking they're competing. Now you are expediting, pushing somebody else above you to help lower your draft pick a little bit. And additionally, are there already 3 teams racing towards the bottom? This is important in this and the next build. Because if there's already 3 teams that own 6 or 7 26 firsts between them, you're a little bit late to the party. You might kind of be stuck in this mold a little bit, right? Those teams aren't going to trade you those 26 firsts or any of their 27 picks if they have those 2. They're already rebuilding. They don't want what you have unless you're looking to move off Jefferson, but they probably don't want Jefferson, honestly, because a lot of teams that are rebuilding are just like, I just want to keep all points off my roster. So those types of context are really important to dig into, know the league, and you might get stuck into a situation where you do the math and there's no way to get further than the 10. The 105 is probably the best pick you can own because there's 3 or 4 teams already racing to the bottom. And to get below them, you would probably have to sell people at sub-market prices. In that situation, what's your thought process, David? Screw everyone, I'm spiteful.
Screw you guys, I'm going home. I mean, it's frustrating. It is. I've had a couple situations like that. I've had to advise in a couple situations like that, and it's difficult. The thing that there's 2 things you can do here. Well, there's 3 things. First of all, you can say, screw you guys. I'm going to try to give you some assets. I'm going to buy whatever junk you have left on your roster. I'm going to try to compete with this trash heap, and I'm going to hope to win some money so that I can extend my ability to rebuild without having to pay extra money. That's a possibility. I get that. Another thing you can do, I doubt many people have traded 28 first yet. If you see there's an issue getting 26 or 27 first, that sucks, but that means your league's probably active. Buy some 28 first and be patient if you have to. And then the third thing, which is kind of, I think, the best way to do it, but it's really threading the needle. You really need to get lucky and find some good trade partners. We want to turn these picks into good young players eventually. Can you just skip that middleman? Can you tier down to Drake London, but add, Xavier Worthy instead of the first? That's not always going to hit, but you're still accomplishing similar goals. You're just not taking points off your team to the point where you're going to get a really high draft pick, but we've already established that that's not going to happen. So you can still retool your roster in a way that helps set you up for the future a little better. But man, it's difficult to do because you got to find the right buyers in that situation. So that's how I would start. I would try to go that way. If that didn't work, I'd probably test the market for 28 first. And then, worst case scenario, I'm going to go try and buy as many points as I can and see what I can do.
Yeah, not a good situation to be in. That is the ideal trade type of situation, is tear down and replace the first you were going to tier for Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, somebody in that they're worth a first-ish as a wide receiver. Maybe we're not always paying a first for this guy, but we understand that's the market value. We'd prefer the liquid first and the flexibility that gives us, but we're not competing without another asset. We need to split the baby. And so when we need to do that, that's a really good piece of advice, David. Now moving off of mid, and that's all that we said about it, mid to mid, and we know we need to rebuild. Important caveat. Already mentioned them already. There's not already a bunch of people beating you to the bottom. There's not already 3 teams tanking. Otherwise, you're in kind of an interesting situation and you own your first. Now, David, if you are mid, you know you need to rebuild. Maybe last year you were starting Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams, who probably will still, produce this year. But
are you looking at my Dynasty DGens roster?
I just remembering it. I already
DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard.
You have Trevor Tracy.
Not to just take over the conversation, but it felt like you were reading that team, and this I think is a good team to talk about for this situation. I had a team that I went for competing out of the startup, which is not normally what I do. I just kind of wanted to test my process. Did very well the first year. Second year, I did get pretty lucky, but I still finished first in the regular season. Took a very honest evaluation of that team after the season, though, and thought there's basically no way that I can retool this roster, keep it healthy, and compete. I might have one more year to squeak out of some of these older guys, but then everything's falling off the cliff, and I'm looking at a multi-year rebuild without question. So I had a pretty strong core. It was Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and then a bunch of old guys that could put up points. T.J. Hawkinson, I guess if you want to count him as a core player, was tight end premium. So, yeah, I guess.
Thanks for Hawk, by the way. I really like him on my roster.
Thanks for helping me retool a little bit. But look, I had enough guys that could carry me to some points, but I knew I wasn't going to compete. There's some other good teams in that league. So I was sending offers almost every day from the end of that season. I was talking to you about it, a couple deals. We were talking almost every day. I was talking with JP, who's in that league. I was just sending out flyers, feelers like, hey, what do you want? Would you be interested in? Do you have the ammo to come by Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts? So you got to be aggressive in this situation because you got to get your rebuild started right. And I don't know, for me at least, I didn't want to just start by selling the veterans, because if I couldn't sell some of my bigger pieces, then I was just going to be stuck like we were just talking about. I was going to have to compete. So I tried to get a couple bigger deals done first. And then once that happened, I was just firing out, Devontae Adams, give me a good second. Michael Pittman Jr., give me any second. I still have some players listed for draft picks. It's, just rapid fire, sell everything you can. And, like we said, with the good young players, don't sell undervalued, but don't have any physical or emotional connection to them. You get a good price for it, boom, done, sell, move on. I think that's just the best thing you can do in this situation is understand your goal here. If it's to get the 101, that's great, but it's to get old players off your roster for the most value you can before they lose more value, which is going to happen.
Much more important than getting the 101. The 101 is a tool that helps you rebuild quicker. But the most important thing to do is not sell so much to get the 101 that you have guaranteed what could and should have been a 1-year retool rebuild becomes a must be 2 years. There are situations where a roster just needs 2 years. And yours would have been that way had you competed one more year. Like you said, you identified if I compete with these old farts, I'm 2 years of hard rebuilding versus I could do a 1-year retool, and you'll still have to reassess. Maybe you'll miss on some rookies and it'll still be 2 years. But I can tell you that 2 years with getting the value for those veterans to rebuild will leave you in a better place than a 2-year nuclear rebuild after pushing yourself to the edge of the cliff would as well. But you do need to make sure that you're not overselling. And I think you've done a good job of that. But we often see people that just say any third for this guy, any second for this guy that's probably worth a late first, right? People are just like, I got to get all points off my rosters. I'll take third for Sam Darnold, something like that, where the guy's easily worth a second, should be considered as worth a second, right? Like, don't oversell. Unless the league is like, this guy will die on my roster, and I think this guy is dead, that's a different situation. You might have to sell cheap. But just again, like you don't sell studs cheap, don't sell your veterans cheap. If you are on this build, unless there's other people racing to get James Conner, Mike Evans off their roster, so you're like, if I don't sell these veterans that I have, somebody else will, and I will miss out on the window because there's only a couple buyers. That's a different situation. And read your league, know your league. But for the most part, these veterans are worth more in season. I would try to sell some now because it's a lot of risk to have on your league. But if you can't get close enough to what you're comfortable wanting for them, hold off a second and somebody will probably pay that for you. Having a veteran on your roster for 3 weeks out of the season will not preclude you from getting the 101. If you can void your RB position at a later date, week 3, week 4, all the way till week 17, that should still be able to qualify you for the 101 from max points for, as long as you're aggressively purging spike week players from your roster as you.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you don't get the 101, it's always nice, but I've seen people way overcommit to that, and that just kind of speaks to the point you were making there. Like, yeah, if you need to sell your vets in a hurry because other people are doing it and there's a race, I can stand losing a 3rd round pick of value here or a 2-3 swap of value there, whatever it is. But if you're selling valuable players for cheap, like how many 1-2 swaps does it take to get from the 103 to the 101 in most years? And that's just a hypothetical question to think about, but like you are giving up value, and that value adds up over time. And if that becomes more valuable than the difference of the 101 to whatever pick you end up at, then you're at a net negative still, because even though you got the 101, you gave up all this extra value that if you would have had the 103 instead, plus all that extra value, then you'd be in a better situation. So don't overcommit to it. Don't get, dead set on it. It's nice to get. It's great to get. I don't know. I kind of want to pivot this conversation here to some other things to do in season. Like you were talking about, wait to sell some of your point producers. I think that's great. But I think on the other side of that coin, buying injured players for the right price is really smart. I made the mistake last year of paying too much for Rashee Rice, which at the time it wasn't too much. Looking back, it was basically Ladd, Bucky, and Tucker Kraft, I think. But it was before they all broke out, because it was like right after Rice got hurt. So like it sucks, but like just be patient. The guy's going to be injured. The person that just had the injury wants to sell him. So you don't need to pay full price. But also think about what that full price is going to be. Think about what Rashee Rice is worth now versus what he was. Think about what Brandon Ayuk is worth now versus what he was when he got injured. Ayuk's value probably hasn't changed that much, to be honest. Rashee Rice's value, honestly, I don't think it's changed that much. I think once they got hurt, their value went down for whatever reason now, until they start playing in games again and prove to us that they're good players. Their value is still a little depressed. So buy injured players, but don't be overly aggressive. Don't rush it, because that's a mistake I made a couple times last year. And I think it still makes sense to buy injured players. Just make sure you take a deep breath when the news happens and you're going through that news cycle,
Yeah. Last year I had one league where I bought Rashee Rice and Brandon Ayuk coming off of injuries. I bought Brandon Ayuk. I paid T. Higgins. I got Brandon Ayuk in a second. This was before Higgins scored 2 touchdowns every game down the stretch. I really regret that one, right? And then conversely, I took a little bit longer to buy Rashee Rice, and I ended up saying like, no, like I'm not moving London, even if I'm getting stuff back, because I don't know that Rice will come back healthy. I ended up getting a Waddle for Rice because I took like 2 weeks to negotiate and nobody else was really tanking, right? I knew I was the only guy looking to buy injured players, and now I realize, take a deep breath. Don't make the same mistake you made with T. Higgins, because Brandon Ayuk lost all of his value, or a lot. He's no longer worth, then he was considered to be worth about a first before the injury. So just watch what the market is doing with the price for a week or two if you can on the injured players. Or if the price drops substantially, you can move on it. But don't buy it close to pre-injury prices. Probably the only exception would be like Neighbors.
Don't put that on him, please.
Knock on wood, but like I wouldn't even say like, or Bowers as well. I wouldn't say that Jefferson and Chase, even if those guys get injured, if they blew out an ACL, I'm not feeling confident that they will rise back to tier 1, because a year off and then how old they are now with a major injury history, I think they'd still be a tier 2 wide receiver and worth right in the neighborhood of 3 firsts, but not everyone is excited about paying it. They're not as liquid. They don't fit every team's timeline anymore. So just be aware that with that big injury, and now it's a player with an injury history, their whole profile changes in a lot of Dynasty players.
And I think also the thing to think about is if you're competing and you lose a guy like Rice, who, at the time especially was, putting up about 20 points per game, small sample size, but, insert player here, whoever it is. If you're competing and you lose that many points in your lineup, you might try not to show it, but you're kind of desperate to fill those points in. So don't be afraid to wait and hold out for what you want if you're trading for that injured player. You might not always get it to go your way. That guy is a little more motivated to make the move than you are, because it doesn't matter when you get those points, when you get that injured player. He's still injured. He's going to sit on your bench till next year, or your IR till next year. I need someone to start. you know? So in that situation, you should be more patient because that person should be more pressed to get something done. Maybe not every situation, but in most situations, I think that's true.
Just in general, also like in a rebuild, couple just general questions for you, David. Do you like to try to get all of your firsts in one draft class? If you have 8 firsts, would you prefer to have 4 and 26, 4 and 27? Do you like to diversify, space them out at all? Do you mind if they're all in one class? What's your kind of philosophy on how you try to approach
I mean, in a perfect world, I would say I'd prefer most of them to be next year and some of them to be the year after. Situationally, that doesn't always work. I don't know that you can measure the value difference there. I just want extra picks. In this exact year right now, we're looking at a 26 class that most people don't think is going to be super strong, and then a 27 class that some people think is going to be generational. I think that could be possible. But in that situation, if 27 firsts are going around the same price as 26 firsts, probably just going to stock up on the 26 firsts, you know? So it depends. I don't care that much if they're all in the same draft, but yeah, in a perfect world, they would be split out a little bit, probably like, I don't know, 70-30-ish to year one and then year two. Year two being the 30% of the value. But that's more of a general rule than something that I'm going to really try to push for.
Just curious, something that came up when I was kind of researching for the show sheet, etc., as a just interesting thought experiment. Probably about the same. Whatever I can get cheapest, honestly, is the truth. If I can get a future price discount, I'll take it. But 2027 is a hard year to get a future price discount for some. Well, for a reason we know. Jeremiah Smith, Archmatic. What can you do? What can you do? All right. So obviously need to know how to pull out of this rebuild as well. But that's a whole another episode topic at some point.
You pretty much go from mid to rebuilding, and then shortly after you come back to mid and competing, right? So just go to the top of the video, and that's your next step of advice.
I mean, you're not entirely wrong. Definitely a good episode of content on how do you evaluate all of that. Would love to bring that to you. Let us know in the comments below if you're interested in that as well. So we hope we walked you through what to do pretty well. Let us know if we missed anything. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a sleeper roster link in the comments below. We'll tell you which of these we think you fit as well. So thank you for joining us for another episode of the Data Construction Podcast. We hope you found this as helpful for you as it was for us. Please remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen or view. And for all of us here at the Data Construction Podcast, until next time.